In this session, we shall discuss the origin and development of the Vedic literature and analyze how it had formed the background of the philosophy of Vedanta. The word Vedanta literally means the end of the Vedas. Generally, the term Vedanta refers to the Upanishads, which constitute the end portion of the Vedas. The Vedas are considered as the oldest systematic exposition of the human quest for explaining the various dimensions of reality, in spite of the difference of opinion regarding the actual period of the composition of the Vedic texts. The Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda and Atharva Veda from 4000 to 2500 BC. There is obvious consensus about the Vedas as the earliest and the extant record of human contemplation. The hymns of Rig Veda mainly consist of the praises of the different deities. The main deities were Agni, Mitra, Indra, Varuna, etc. The hymns describe the noble and benevolent activities of these gods and pray for their blessings and help. The different gods were conceived as the forces underlying and controlling the various phenomena of nature, such as rain, the sun, water, fire, etc. Living beings of this earth have to depend on these phenomena. We can see that the Vedic seers had also put forth certain specific ideas like the Rita that implied their quest for a unitary principle that underlies the diversity of reality and gods. The Vedas are primarily concerned with the religious prescriptions for maintaining the proper relationship between human beings and gods for ensuring peace in this life and in the afterlife. The most prominent feature of Vedic religion is its ritualism. The Vedas consist of 4 sections, namely the mantras, brahmanas, aranyakas and the Upanishads. Mantras, the first section of the Vedas, consist of hymns of religious prayers. They are addressed to various gods and goddesses that control human destiny. The second section, namely brahmanas, deal with the rituals and ceremonies to be performed in order to please the gods. This portion of the Vedas, unlike the mantras, is composed in prose. They describe and also prescribe the instructions to perform the yajnas. Aranyakas describe the sacrifices to be performed by the person who has entered the vanaprastha stage. Meditation on certain symbols is spoken of as its great merit. Such meditation was offered as a substitute for elaborate sacrifices. The last portion, namely Upanishads, are really the philosophical part of the Vedas. Being the end portion of the Vedas, it is also known as Vedanta. They clearly indicate the turn of the Rishi's mind to obviously philosophical and spiritual ideas. Hence, Upanishads are hailed as the fruitful fulfillment of the vision of the Vedas. The mantras, together with brahmanas, constitute the Karma Kanda of the Vedas. The Aranyakas are called Upasana Kanda or the meditative section. The Upanishads are called the Jnana Kanda or the portion dealing with the knowledge section. The initial attempt at philosophical speculation can be found in the Upanishads. They contain lucid exposition of the self, God, and the world. The German philosopher Schopenhauer writes, "In the whole world, there is no study so beneficial and so elevating as that of the Upanishads. It will be the solace of my death." The Brahmanas give us specific instructions to various sacrifices and their corresponding uses. Sacrifice consisted in the offerings of certain materials to the gods in accordance with the procedure laid down in the Brahmanas. The materials offered were milk, grain, ghee, etc. The motive behind such offerings was some specific object of desire, such as birth of children, prosperity, and success over enemies, etc. The efficacy of the sacrifices on bringing about a certain result was never doubted. Vedic literature described sacrifices as more valuable than gods themselves. Thus, the sanctity of the Vedas was recognized as supreme. A class of priests emerged as authoritative on matters related to sacrifices. Ritualistic culture became so prominent that the proper performance of yajnas was considered as the means to attain prosperity and happiness in life. Now we shall see the evolution from polytheism to monotheism. Another feature of Vedic religion was the tendency to monotheism. It is true that in its earliest form, Vedic religion was polytheistic, with its original belief in a plurality of gods. But this belief gradually lost its attraction as Vedic seers proceeded to conceive any one of the gods as the deity presiding over all the other gods. It was the starting point of monotheistic tendencies in Vedic culture. They began to believe that instead of many gods to be regarded as many causes of natural phenomena, there is one ultimate cause of the phenomena. The change from polytheism to monotheism did not take place suddenly, but through many stages of shifting the supremacy from one god to another. None of these supreme gods retains the supremacy for a long period, and most important god in this period was Prajapati, or the father god, who is the personification of the creative power of nature. Even his position diminishes as time passed on. The tendency to regard one after another god as supreme and yet not recognizing that supremacy for a long period of time is described by Max Muller as henotheism. It must have prepared the way for the belief in only one God. Belief in the unity of all gods, which one finds in the Rig Veda, really paved the way to conceive the unity of all existence. In the well-known Purusha Sukta in the Rig Veda, the Vedic scholars picture the organic unity of the whole existence. The whole universe, earth, planets, gods, living and non-living things are all visualized as the parts of one Purusha or the cosmic person. The Purusha pervades the whole world and further transcends it. All that is, has been, and will be are included in him, the Purusha. The Supreme Reality, therefore, is both immanent and transcendent. It is clear that the monotheistic vision of Vedic seers had gradually culminated in monism that explains the whole existence in terms of one unitary principle. It traces the whole of existence to a single source that transcends all the variety and plurality of reality. As the first step towards monism, we have pantheism, according to which God and nature are identified as one. Monism explains the universe not as created by an external agency, but as a spontaneous unfolding of a supra-sensible first cause. In later mantras, the first cause is conceived in many different ways. It appears as the infinite in one place and as time or kala in another place. The ultimate reality is dynamic and self-evolving. This power is immanent in the universe, even though it transcends it. This concept of a single ultimate principle that underlies all reality had been eventually developed into the ultimate eternal absolute that manifests into the world, that is the Brahman. Now we shall discuss the concept of Rita. The Vedic definition of Rita is of great significance in the history of Indian thought. Rita literally means the course of things that keep or follow a definite order, and hence it refers to both cosmic as well as moral order. The gods were regarded as the guardians of Rita. It is unchangeable and eternal. Originally, it meant the uniformity of nature. There is a law governing the whole universe. It is in accordance with this law that the sun, moon, and the stars keep to their course in heaven, and seasons of the year follow one another in a definite sequence. In later Vedic literature, Rita stands for dharma, which means righteousness. The Vedic gods are supposed to be the guardians of not only the cosmic order, but also the moral order. The moral law secures the integrity of the moral world by upholding the good and destroying the evil. Varuna is the custodian of Rita, as he is responsible for maintaining the cosmic and moral order. He is spoken of as the god of heavenly light. Laws of the physical universe are fixed by him. It is said that he knows all things happening in all places, for the sun is described as his eyes. It is not only Varuna who is regarded as the guardian of Rita, but one can find this conception of Varuna being superseded after some time by the conception of Indra as the custodian and controller of Rita. He is the god of battles. Indra's supremacy was but for a short time. He had soon to give place to others, and so we can say that it was not one god who was regarded as the guardian, but several gods in turn were the guardians of Rita. One can also see in it a tendency to regard Rita as more important than the gods, and this is indeed a mark of philosophic excellence. Now we shall see the concept of God in Vedic religion. The Vedic religion displays a long list of gods. Each god represented a natural power. One peculiarity to be noted is that these gods are divine only in a qualified sense, because even though they are revered as deities, they are conceived in the human form, of course, with supernatural powers. There are situations in which these divine powers exhibit base human motives and passions. They are in reality glorified human beings, and therefore neither wholly natural nor wholly supernatural. The Vedic pantheon presents to us innumerable gods with designated powers and responsibilities. Often, some peculiar quality or aspect of nature is raised to the level of God. Example, Indra was supposed to be the rain god. In certain cases, some abstract quality was conceived as God. For example, Varuna is revered as the god of virtue and the guardian of all that is worthy and good. He is omniscient. Wherever two people brought in secret, he is present there as a third person unseen. Varuna knows the sins of man, but he is ready to forgive the sinner compassionately. The nature of the early Vedic religion consists in abstracting a single quality of the human individual and raising it at the level of God. Well-known historian of Indian philosophy, Hiriyanna, describes it as anthropomorphism, which means that God is incomplete personality conceived in the human image. It shows that gods were enlarged and ennobled pictures of human beings, distinguished by the possession of a particular excellence. The Vedas are beyond doubt theistic because they preach the faith in many gods. But at times, each one of the many gods is praised as the supreme God, who is the creator of this world and the God of all gods. In this henotheism of the Vedas, we can see the archetype of the later evolved spiritual monism. At least at a later stage of their composition, the Vedas show definite inclination to postulate the only one ultimate reality, of which different gods are only a manifestation. Rigveda clearly conveys this idea in the hymn Ekam Sat Viprabahuda Vadanti. That is, the only one reality is called by the wise in different ways. So, in the Vedic literature, one can see the gradual evolution from the metaphysical theme, from polytheism through monotheism and henotheism, finally into monism. Even today, Hindus believe and worship different gods, but at the bottom level, they believe in one all-inclusive reality. Vedic seers conceived not only the unity of all gods, but also the idea of the unity of all existence. Rigveda explains that all existence, including the earth, planets, gods, living and non-living things, are all parts of one supreme person or Purusha who pervades the whole reality. Vedas also postulate that the reality underlying all existence cannot be explained because it is neither existent nor non-existent. That is neither Sat nor Asat. The absolute is indeterminate and therefore indescribable. This absolute reality is sometimes called Brahman and sometimes Atman. So, Brahman and Atman are used synonymously in different contexts. As we have already mentioned, the Upanishads form the end or final portion of the Vedas, not only in terms of times, but also in the case of philosophical development. The most obvious indication of this can be found in the perfect expressions of the finger posts of spiritualist monism implied in the Vedic vision attained in the Upanishads. This became the motivation for the later evolved Vedanta Darshana propounded by Mimamsakas and Advaitins. Hence, it is clear that the different schools of Vedanta have taken their basic themes from the essential teachings in the Vedas, and they have given different interpretations to them. Yet, the monistic metaphysics and the doctrine of liberation remains the essential core of Vedanta Darshana. Now, we shall see the different Vedanta schools. Paul Deusen's definition of Vedanta as the culmination of Vedic teaching and wisdom is noteworthy. In due course, Vedanta had assimilated a number of various interpretations of the Upanishads. There are mainly three schools of Vedanta as they exist today. First one is the Advaita philosophy of non-dualism as propounded by Shankara. Then the second, Vishishtadvaita or qualified non-dualism of Ramanuja, and finally Dvaita, the dualistic position taken by Madhvacharya. These schools of Vedanta are referred to as Mimamsa to show their concern for the Pramana Shastra of the Mimamsakas. It is true that the Purva Mimamsa schools were obviously concerned with the Karma Kanda or the ritualistic part of the Vedas, whereas the Uttara Mimamsa or Advaita had emphasized the philosophical part or Jnana Kanda. Remember that the literal meaning of Upanishad is sitting close to and listening to the words of the Guru. But it has also the practical meaning, that which destroys ignorance and illusion to realize the ultimate reality. Hence, the philosophy of Vedanta is precisely the prescription to attain the genuine truth of reality that has been concealed by the veil of ignorance or avidya. The Vedanta perception of the ultimate reality as the one immutable and eternal absolute, that is indescribable and inexpressible, was anticipated in the Nasadiya Sukta in Rigveda. Now listen to a representative hymn of it. Non-being then existed not, nor being. There was no air nor sky that is beyond it. What was concealed? Wherein? In whose protection? And was there deep, unfathomable water? According to this hymn, all reality is the manifestation of a single, unproduced, ultimate reality that is beyond all determinations and explanations. We can see that the seed of monistic concept of reality had been developed into the well-known principle of Brahman, Atman, identity in the systematic interpretations of Vedanta like the Advaita philosophy. And we further come across its practical applications to reform our society in the mission of Indian Renaissance through the great spiritual leaders like Swami Vivekananda and Sri Narayana Guru. The sages who had composed the Upanishads found the life around as full of changing forms. This panorama of perennial change and impermanence prompted them to seek some unchanging and eternal principle that transcends all that is transitory throughout. This led them to conceive that ultimate reality of Brahman as the uncaused cause that is imperishable and immutable. It had been conceived as the primordial reality from which the variety and plurality of the apparent world bursts forth. It is relevant here to remember that the term Brahman is derived from the root br, meaning to burst forth. The ultimate source of all reality, namely Brahman, is manifest in the inner world of all beings as Atman. Hence, Brahman is the one cosmic intellect which inheres in the individuals as the core of their existence. The two, Brahman and Atman, are neither distinct nor independent because they represent the non-dual reality that pervades and sustains all. Atman occupies the inner world as the imperishable and immutable witness of all that one is thinking and doing. It is the eternal light that illumines and reveals all that comes to mind. Atman is neither the ego nor the mind that is subject to change. Upanishads and Vedanta Darshana distinguish between lower empirical knowledge and higher spiritual knowledge as aparavidya and paravidya respectively. To attain the higher knowledge is the ultimate goal of life that is described as moksha. It precisely involves the realization of the ultimate truth that there is no actual differentiation between the individual self and the cosmic self. Hence, paravidya implies both the realization of truth and self-realization. This leads us to the spiritual realization of the ultimate non-distinction that is temporarily concealed by the veil of ignorance. Thus, Vedanta elevates knowledge and truth to a higher plane of unity and oneness, which is of course a valuable and necessary lesson to the world and humanity today that is torn into fragments in terms of so many fake identities like race, gender, caste and religion. For us today, such confusing discriminations look like real identities and ideologies. Attaining the genuine knowledge of reality as ultimately one is the way of Vedanta. Remember the fable told by Saint Sri Ramakrishna. Once, a young lion was brought up in a flock of sheep. It never knew that it was actually a lion. One day, a lion came across this flock and saw the young lion with the sheep. When he got an opportunity, the lion told the lion sheep about its true identity, but it did not believe. Then one day, the lion took him to a lake and pointed to his image in water. At the sight of the true image, the lion sheep realized his true identity and could roar with the senior lion. It was no more a sheep but a lion. This is the case of everyone immersed in the ignorance of the oneness of reality as unchanging and composed of many. Once we realize the truth of non-duality and non-distinction, it will be possible to recognize the superimposition or adhyasa of plurality on the actually one world and one humanity. This Vedanta doctrine of oneness will become the basis of an all-embracing ethics of compassion and concern for others. Where else we can search for the source of inspiration, for the approved watchword of Indian nation? Unity in diversity. Now, let us summarize this session. In this unit, we have marked the origin and development of classical Indian philosophy as the earliest attempt at speculative thinking in the history of humankind. In the Vedas, we can find the different forms of religious practices coupled with the sparks of philosophical insights. Vedic religion began with naturalistic polytheism, which eventually transformed into monotheism and finally into monism. There was also a transitory stage of henotheism. Monistic tendencies in Vedic religion had culminated in the conception of one all-inclusive reality. The Vedic concepts like Rita and Purusha indicate this unifying tendency in ancient Indian philosophy. Such ideas can be regarded as the archetype of the Upanishadic doctrine of the unity of all existence, the Vedanta Darshana of the eternal, immutable and indeterminable absolute indicates the culmination of the human desire to postulate what we refer to as the unity in diversity. Before we attend the next session, please try to answer the following questions. First, elucidate the significance of the Vedas in Indian philosophy. Then, discuss the distinctive features of Vedic religion. Third, analyze the sparks of monism in Vedic philosophy. And fourth, bring out the concept of the ultimate reality in the Upanishads. Now, we shall see some of the important works for reference. First, you take Dr. S. Radhakrishnan's work on Indian philosophy in 2 volumes, published by Allen and Unwin in 1971. Then the book by C.D. Sharma, A Critical Survey of Indian Philosophy from Motilal Banarsi Das, published in 2009. And another one is Fundamentals of Indian Philosophy, written by Ramakrishna Puligadla, published by D.K. Printworld, New Delhi in 2008. Another useful book is Outlines of Indian Philosophy by Hiriyanna, published by Motilal Banarsi Das in 2009. So, thank you for watching this session. See you next time. Until then, bye.